Hosni Mubarak appears to be on his deathbed. The press have started to analyse his legacy at this stage already, haven't they?
Yes, the obituaries have already been rolled out in lots of places, Stuart, but there's an interesting piece in Foreign Policy saying what then will be, as they put it, the Pharaoh's legacy. They say he leaves behind a broken Egypt. He'll be remembered for squalid politics, brutality and repression. They say he was considered a reformist when he came to power in 1981, following, of course, Nasser and Anwar Sadat, who were both larger-than-life political characters, they say, and have gone down in history for carrying out enormous changes in Egypt. Now, at one point, they thought he might be able to do the same. When he arrived in power, he released a lot of people from prison who Sadat had imprisoned, and it looked like he might be making the country more liberal. But now they say he leaves a broken system. The wealth gap grew hugely under his rule, along, of course, with popular anger about it. Egypt's creaky institutions, its nascent democracy, the state education system and the public health system, they say, have been left in disarray by his rule, and he should be responsible for it. But how important was his role really in all of this? The Atlantic questions, dead or alive, they say, Mubarak is a sideshow. It's not like Gaddafi, who was really his regime incarnate and it collapsed with the man himself. The military structure of the regime in Egypt went far beyond one man. There was a huge amount of power held by people below him who, of course, still hold it after those constitutional changes that they forced through over the weekend, which mobilised a lot more popular anger, a lot more emotion than the trial of Mubarak himself. So for the Egyptian protesters, for ordinary Egyptians, they recognise that the power lies in the system, and with these ranks of internationally anonymous generals, not necessarily names that you know, more than it did in the man himself.
What about other world leaders then? They've obviously been meeting at the G20. How have they gone down in the press?
Well, did they achieve anything over the euro crisis, or didn't they? There seems to be a disagreement about this among the papers. The Guardian has headlined on Merkel poised to agree rescue deal for Spain. Now, that's something they sort of heard from an anonymous source in the background of the G20. It's not officially confirmed, but they say Angela Merkel is ready to allow the European Financial Stability Fund to directly bail out Spain, which it's not currently allowed to do, to directly give money or to directly buy the Spanish government's bonds. The European Central Bank did buy up 200 billion euros worth of Greek government bonds in 2010. Then it was stopped by Germany, who said that was not its role and it should just concentrate on worrying about inflation. So is she ready now to change the role of these European stability funds? We're not entirely sure. It's certainly not good enough for Spanish paper El País, who headline on Brussels trying to mitigate the impact of bank rescues on the debt. Of course, for them, they point out the key thing is that it wasn't the Spanish state that got itself into so much debt in the first place. Really, it was Spanish banks who collapsed and the state was forced to bail them out. So until the European Financial Stability Fund can directly bail out Spain's banks without having to go through the government, the Spanish essentially won't be happy. For the Independent, nothing happened really in Mexico, and they've gone to fallen back on some fairly hoary racial stereotypes. They've got those G20 leaders sitting under a massive sombrero, putting things off until mañana.
Excellent stuff. Talking of racial stereotypes, David Cameron's views on French tax exiles causing controversy still, isn't it?
They've badly upset The Guardian, who say he's trying to make a mockery of democracy. They say that just a few months ago, Cameron was saying that the scale of tax avoidance in the UK was dreadful and morally repugnant. Now he's saying he wants to roll out the red carpet for French tax exiles. Quite a contradiction there. They say he seems to be trying to turn the UK into more of a tax haven. Of course, it already is. If you're not a British citizen and you live there, you can get non-domiciled status, which means you do not pay the British taxes that citizens pay. Now, this, according to The Guardian, is unfair and socially divisive. And anyway, it's undemocratic. If the French vote for a high tax regime, unfortunately, democracy means that French citizens need to abide by what the majority have chosen. It's not up to a minority to go and decide they can do what they like. The Times, a right-wing paper that generally backs Cameron, has actually turned out against this themselves today. They've carried out a major investigation into tax avoidance, and now you're probably not of the right generation for this to upset you, Stuart, but I can say that if you were a teenage girl in the 1990s...
I'm not a girl either.
You're not a girl, but if you were... Your heroes have fallen embarrassingly and been caught out by the Times, avoiding large amounts of their tax.
Oh, okay.
The Taxman versus Take That is their headline today. Now, Take That apparently were among about 1,000 well-known and wealthy people connected to the music industry who've been caught out by a Times investigation, squirreling millions of pounds away in secret offshore accounts that were supposedly set up as businesses. They weren't really. So the four members of Take That apparently have between them squirreled away £26 million worth of earnings from CDs and tour sales.
Gary Barlow, how on earth could he do that? He's meant to be a big royalist as well. All right, Elena, thank you very much. Elena Casas with the International Newspaper Review here on France 24. Here's the headlines once again. Egypt's state